Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined by the one and only Wes Hodkiewicz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field. Wes, our comeback episode, I know you don't want to call it that, but I'm going to. Our comeback episode on Tuesday, we reviewed the offseason to this point for the Green Bay Packers, looking at various key positions and how things have changed shape for the 2025 Packers. I want to continue to review the 2025 offseason to this point, but in a little bit different way, in that I'm going to throw a question at you.
Okay.
And then I'll let you answer it, and then I will also answer it. And as usual, I didn't prep you with the questions in advance. You're perhaps going to steal one of my answers, and I will just have to react and deal with it if that happens.
Nice.
But first question. Of all of the offseason moves the Packers have made, and here where I'm talking about signings in free agency, re-signing your own players, what's happened in the draft, what's happened with the coaching staff, like any and everything that encompasses the Packers offseason, what would you point to right now as the most significant?
Brandon McManus.
Okay.
And let's just be honest, Mike. I mean, the Green Bay Packers went through a roller coaster through the first relatively month and a half, and really the whole offseason. I think they went and cycled through, 7 different kickers before ultimately McManus ended up coming and sort of saving the season for Green Bay. The fact that the Packers ranked in the middle of the pack in field goal accuracy after how things started, and no disrespect to Braden Narveson, but you had a rookie kicker coming in that gets claimed at the end of camp and has to come in, and he's in a new spot. And I felt like McManus was the one that started the turnaround for Green Bay's special teams. It felt like, yes, it was the field goal unit and all of that, but it also just felt like everything sort of synced up a little bit more. And you and I on Tuesday's show, we were discussing these different positions and potential battles. Michael, when was the last time the Packers on this day, in May of 2025, third week of the offseason program, have had one kicker, one punter, and one long snapper, in addition to obviously Alex Hale, the international player exemption. But right now, it's about as stable as it's been in years as far as being able to maintain and keep Brandon McManus in the fold. And for him to have the season that he had with only 2 missed field goals the entire way, certainly one of them was obviously in the game against Philadelphia, but right. This was such a massive signing for Green Bay in the middle of the season, and to be able to extend him and keep him around, I think is going to have a huge impact on those defense and the special teams units going forward.
Yeah, and I like that. I like that choice. I think for me, as far as of right now, looking at things right now, the one that I feel is the most significant was the free agent signing of Nate Hobbs at cornerback, and I say that for a couple reasons. One, obviously, the situation with Jair Alexander is still not resolved. We're not quite sure where that's going to go. At the time that the Packers made the signing of Hobbs, there wasn't any certainty as to how things were going to unfold with Alexander. So it's significant from that standpoint. I think it's also significant, as we talked about on our last show, how the Packers are investing in another defensive back who they feel they can line up in different places. Yep. It's another Keyshawn Nixon whom they feel can line up and defend on the boundary, but also line up and play in the slot, and giving Jeff Hafley and this defense that many, yet another movable part among many movable parts in his secondary. And then the other reason I would say it was significant, and this is a little bit sort of revisionist history in a weird sort of way if you follow along here. But it became significant because I would have almost bet my house that the Packers were going to draft a cornerback within the first 4 rounds of this draft. Not saying it had to be the first round pick, but I thought just within the first 150 picks of this draft, the Packers were going to take a cornerback. And the board just didn't fall that way for them. I think if the board falls a certain way, they probably do, but the board didn't fall that way, and they end up actually not getting a cornerback until the 7th round with Micah Robinson. And then, as I mentioned, also bringing in a highly touted undrafted player in Jonathan Baldwin, who many people thought would be drafted. But the reason that it makes the Hobbs signing that much more significant, not only because of just what you did for the cornerback room and bringing in a veteran, but with the board not falling the way you were hoping or maybe thinking it would fall during the draft, they didn't have to just go out and reach for a cornerback and, we got to make sure we get one of these guys before they're gone. The signing of Hobbs, like even with the cornerback board didn't fall quite right in the draft, but Brian Gutekunst could still just sit back and say, hey, it's okay. We're all right. The Alexander thing is still up in the air, but we brought in Hobbs. We have Nixon. There's Carrington Valentine. So I think the Hobbs signing was really significant for a lot of reasons there. Question number 2. Which offseason move of everything that has happened to this point are you most curious to see what results from it?
Ooh. Wow.
I know that's a tough one.
Mike Spofford bringing fastballs.
I'm putting you on the spot here.
Okay, so this is counting the draft class as well, right?
Sure, yeah. It's the entire
Because I could answer this 2 ways.
Okay.
But can I start with the draft class? Because when you're asking me the question, which move entices me the most, which move I'm most excited to see, it's Savion Williams.
Okay.
Because when you have a guy that is utilized the way he was utilized at TCU, and I think you and I would both agree, just based on the depth of the receive position, he's not going to have that many opportunities, you would think. I mean, it was like they were building the whole offense around him at Texas Christian. So what aspects of his game does Matt LaFleur, Adam Stenavich, Jason Vrabel, do they look to extract and utilize right out of the gate? Because I think he can help them, but I couldn't tell you, based on his workload and the multitude of ways that he was utilized in college, exactly what he's going to do in Green Bay. Okay, be that as it may. The Isaiah Simmons one is really interesting to me with the Packers signing him, and it was the last move they've made in the free agency window here.
Okay.
But this guy is 5 years removed from being the 8th overall pick in the NFL draft. And he's never missed a game because of injury, incredibly durable, played a lot of football for the Arizona Cardinals the first 2.5 years, and has just sort of been trying to find his spot, ever since that Cliff Kingsbury era ended in Arizona. So is he going to be on special teams? Is he going to be a guy that you could potentially sprinkle into the defense? Will he end up earning a role on the defense? We don't know.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about low-risk, high-reward signings, I think Isaiah Simmons might take the cake, because the more I was listening to Matt LaFleur discuss, the conversations with him, they brought him in for a visit. They signed him 2 weeks later after the draft, when they didn't really add any other inside linebackers, natural inside linebackers.
Right.
So it almost in a way sort of felt like the Devondre Campbell signing to me in 2021, where it's this guy that's sort of sitting out there trying to find the right opportunity, and ultimately he settles on Green Bay.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to look at it. And with regard to bringing Simmons in for a visit, and then, the signing ends up happening a couple weeks later, we heard from Matt LaFleur, like, they were doing some more checking. They checked with Xavier McKinney because he played with them, with the Giants, and they were wanting to get more opinions and more thoughts about him and whatnot. The 2 thumbs up came from Xavier McKinney, and that was a factor in that move as well. The most curious one for me that I am interested to see what results from it is the change at defensive line coach.
Yeah, sure.
DeMarcus Covington being brought in to take over running the Packers defensive line, with Jason Rebrovich being let go. The reason this one stands out to me so much is because for all of the discussion outside the building about what are the Packers going to do about their pass rush, et cetera, and we heard from Brian Gutekunst at the Combine in Indianapolis, at the owners' meetings down in Florida. He has a lot of confidence in the players in that defensive front room, the guys who are going to make up the pass rush. Now, he said, hey, guys need to progress. They need to get better. They need to be more consistent, more reliable. The as we talked about on the last show, the progression is expected from guys like Lucas Van Ness. A little more consistency and reliability is expected from Rashawn Gary, the veteran guy. And also from the interior guys, Kenny Clark, Devontae Wyatt, the guys who have been there, done that to this point, need to step up their games as well. But hearing all of that throughout the offseason about how Brian Gutekunst felt about the Packers pass rush tells me they really feel that Covington can make a difference with this unit, can take the guys that the Packers have and get more out of them. And try to push that group forward in the way that's been envisioned. So that's the one that has my curiosity. And I think it's also, and this was pointed out a month or so ago by an Insider Inbox reader, and I apologize for forgetting exactly who it was. But it's also a very shrewd move on Matt LaFleur's part to bring in a guy like Covington. He had just risen. Over the last handful of years, he'd risen from the bottom of the totem pole on Bill Belichick's coaching staff in New England all the way up to defensive coordinator for Jared Mayo in the first year after Belichick is gone from the Patriots. And now New England decided to clean house with the Mayo coaching staff, and so this guy becomes available. But he's considered still a rising star in the coaching ranks. He has a year of experience as a defensive coordinator in the NFL. And we all know that all it took was 1 year for Jeff Hafley to be here, and he was getting some overtures for possible head coach vacancies. So in that larger picture of things, I think a very shrewd and also intriguing and curious hire by Matt LaFleur.
And while you are not wrong with the Jeff Hafley comparison, I almost look at it, especially once I read more about Covington's credentials. He almost kind of reminds me more of the Anthony Campanelli type hire, where Campanelli was rising through the ranks and was well respected as linebackers coach with Miami. He came here for 1 year, and now he's going to be the defensive coordinator of the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's the sort of trajectory Covington was on, and obviously, unfortunately, New England kind of had to restart this year, and certainly I think there was that, I don't want to call it infatuation, but definitely that flirtation with Mike Vrabel going back there and taking that over and sort of continuing that, even though he didn't coach for him, that Bill Belichickian sort of mantra that they've developed there. So Covington's available, and I think it's a great example of a guy coming in here now where this is a big undertaking for the Packers, and he also, I think, took on the run game coordinator role as well.
Yeah.
Where you're trying to maintain what you did against the run last year, as you've pointed out, while improving upon the natural pass rush and getting more out of those edge rushers. It's a big undertaking, but he has a ton of weapons and a ton of depth to be able to try doing it.
Yeah. Question number 3. I really like the comparison to the Campanelli hire, though. By the way, thank you. That's nicely done. Appreciate the addition to my answer to that question. Question number 3 for you: what offseason move the Packers have made do you expect to pay the most immediate dividends?
Ooh.
The greatest immediate impact. Which one would you go?
You know what? You touched on it. I'm going to pull it back.
All right.
And I'm going to say Nate Hobbs signing.
Okay.
Because here's the thing. You have to edit my Insider Inbox column. Congratulations on that. And one of the points I raised this week is the walls are breaking down here between what teams consider to be perimeter cornerbacks and slot nickel cornerbacks. There was a time, I'll never forget this, in 2014, where the Packers had this gridlock, this logjam of cornerbacks. They couldn't get Devon House on the field because he didn't play inside, but they had a lot of options outside with Tramon Williams and I believe at that time Sam Shields and what was his Pro Bowl season after he re-signed. So they had guys they felt like could play, but they just couldn't get them on the field. Now you're seeing this Nate Hobbs, Keyshawn Nixon type of cornerback that depending on where you need them, what the scheme is, what the game is, what the matchups are, and also what the injury situation is, where you can move these guys around. And I think you're seeing that type of versatility and the value in that versatility league-wide. And as you and I discussed with Hobbs and his signing, there's a lot of projection there, but there's some proven ability to play both inside and outside based on his time with the Raiders. Now, all that being said, another analogy I threw out there, another argument that I made in Inbox was we always look at these starting fives of offensive lines and the versatility. I think you almost need to maintain the same type of approach with the secondary because in a lot of cases, much like an offensive line, Those guys are going to be out there. 4 of them certainly are likely going to be out there at all times.
Yeah.
Maybe 5, depending on what the matchup is. If you have that many players that you're counting on to be on the field, you have to have not only depth, but versatility to replace that depth if injuries occur.
Yeah.
I think Hobbs is going to be a big part of that for Jeff Hafley's defense. And also the exciting thing is, too, last year it was Hafley trying to figure out a lot of these pieces that Green Bay already had and fitting them into his defense. Now he's having the opportunity to look at a guy like Nate Hobbs and say, you know what? I can do something with that guy.
Yeah. I think I think that's a good point. My answer on the most immediate dividends, I was actually going to go with Brandon McManus on this because of just the idea that for the first time in 3 years, the Packers are heading into an offseason, a training camp, the start of a season with no questions about kicker.
Right.
Since moving on from Mason Crosby. So first time in 3 years they're in that
It's a
position.
better way of saying what I tried to say in the first
No,
segment.
it was just a.
But it's not like Alex Hale's being
an
expected to
additional-
compete with him for the
exactly.
job.
There are no questions about that position for the first time in 3 years. I will go a slightly different direction, but also rehash a little bit of what we talked about on our next show. As far as immediate dividends, I think it could be the selection of Matthew Golden at the top of the draft in the first round, because we saw and we've talked about so often how differently defenses have to defend the Packers when Christian Watson is on the field, with the speed that he brings and that fear that he strikes of the big play. It dictates defensive alignments. It dictates the way teams scheme up against you. And when Watson has not been available, that's made things a lot harder on the Packers offense. So until you get Christian Watson back sometime later in the fall, second half of the season, whatever it's going to be, even though Golden is a completely different player in terms of body type and a different type of receiver, you have replaced Christian Watson's speed now. Yep. You are putting a guy on the field with that speed element that defenses are going to have to account for now. So that's why that would be my other answer to paying the most immediate dividends. Last one for you before I'll take care of some sponsor business. Most surprising off-season move for you.
Well, I mean, it's probably the Elton Jenkins, him going to center. I didn't anticipate that. I thought there was a chance that Josh Myers wouldn't be back. I remember, I could tell you exactly what, it seems like whenever, we always, much as you and I joke about, like when you go on PTO, something big usually happens. It does seem like whenever the Packers make an unrestricted free agency signing, like I'm always doing something or I'm out in the area. I'll never forget, I got done running over at Meadowbrook Park in Howard, Wisconsin. I got back to my car. I'm winded, out of shape, sweating, and I'm just leaning against my car and I pull up my phone and it says, the Packers have signed Aaron Banks. And immediately I'm like, okay, the guard from San Francisco, and I'm thinking to myself, like, did he play center at Notre Dame? Like, because I just remembered him being the guy that replaced Quentin Nelson and then got drafted and basically started a bulk of 4 years for San Francisco. And it's like, no, he didn't. So once you step back from it, it's a very logical move. I would take Elton Jenkins at center over any of these guys that were available on the market. I don't know a lot about the draft class, but in terms of the unrestricted free agents we saw, from Atlanta, the Bears signed, was that Chris Dolman? I'm trying to remember what his name was, the new center that they got there. I'd take Elton over that guy. I mean, it's just the way that this thing goes. So it surprised me, but that being said, once you step back a little bit, you start to understand the method to the madness, so to speak. Yeah,
and that was my pick as well in terms of the signing of Aaron Banks. I thought that was the most surprising.
Drew Dalman.
Dalman. Yes,
I'm sorry about that.
No, that's okay. It didn't come to me right away either, and I was going to say Drew, and then I couldn't think of the last name. So, but no, I think the Banks signing was surprising because as we headed into free agency, all the talk was, okay, are the Packers going to do something at receiver? Are they going to do something, with the pass rush? Where are they going to spend the money? And then boom, the first one we find out about, it's an offensive lineman, and they're going to take their 2-time Pro Bowl guard and kick him over to center. So I agree with you on that one being surprising. The other one I'll throw out there, because it kind of goes along with what you were talking about with Isaiah Simmons, but it's bringing in McCole Hardman at wide receiver because he wasn't a guy at the top of the free agent market or anything like that at wide receiver. And when it didn't surprise me that Gutekunst didn't go there at receiver, I did feel that he was going to go into this draft, and I said it many times in Insider Inbox, that he was going to try to look for the next Christian Watson in this draft, or the next potential guy like that. And he did draft the fastest receiver of all the guys at the combine. But once free agency had sort of been going for a while, and the draft is still hanging out there, I just didn't expect them to bring in any receiver to a room that is already, kind of crowded when you've got a wide receiver 5-6 types like Malik Heath and Bo Melton, who have played and done some things and contributed in games and still trying to establish themselves in the league, that bringing in a veteran like Hardman, kind of later in free agency into that room. Now they're going to look at him as a returner. He's got some other abilities as far as different ways to get him the ball, kind of thing, like Savion Williams. But just that, that move kind of surprised me, because at that point in free agency, I just didn't necessarily think the Packers were going to be looking at wide receivers there.
The one thing that Gutekunst has done an exceptional job of, is he definitely has kicked the tires on veteran players more than Ted did.
Yeah.
Ted would do it occasionally, and it would usually end up being like during training camp when like a Cedric Benson would come in because there's just a deluge of injuries at a position, for example, in that case, running back. Brian, since the day he got hired, I think of Byron Bell and some of these other guys. Certainly Mercedes Lewis coming in and end up playing 5 years for him. Mm-hmm. These guys that aren't the top of the wire guys that are affected the compensatory process, Brian has been willing to take a look, and sometimes it doesn't work out, but then sometimes you do find somebody, and that's one thing I think the Packers have definitely benefited from over the last 5-6 years.
Yeah. All right. Well, one other topic I want to get to, but I will take care of sponsor business here. Sirius XM NFL Radio, it delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. And at Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50-plus years of better. All right, last topic to hit on today, because I wanted to talk about this before the draft being hosted by Green Bay gets too far into the rearview mirror. I think we can all agree that bringing the draft to Green Bay, and as successful as the entire production was, the crowds, the spectacle, everything with the stage, and then the selections of Golden and Sorrell in the 4th round and just all that, the whole thing kind of becomes the crown jewel of Mark Murphy's tenure as president of the Green Bay Packers, and we know he is retiring later this summer. So my last question to you for this show is, aside from bringing the draft to Green Bay, what do you feel will be the biggest part of Mark Murphy's legacy when he officially retires?
Lambeau Field.
Yeah.
Titletown. Everything that has been developed, and just the amazing advancement of this organization and this franchise. The Green Bay Packers, we obviously always will give respect to Bob Harlan, his foresight, the need that for the renovations and the Lambeau Field atrium. But for Mark to keep his foot on the gas throughout all that, you listen to this, and you see it now at the NFL PA rankings every year, the amount of investment this team makes in its football facilities. You're seeing it on the east side of the stadium. The development of Titletown, and a place that my son will go and ice skate at and play in the playground at, and Mike, frankly, the position that I'm in right now, the Green Bay Packers, the way that this organization has grown from a staffing perspective. You can go talk to some of the people who have been here since the 1990s, and you can look at the old media guides, and there's 35 employees in there. We're over 300 now, and that just shows you the vision and being able to keep up in this race with billion-dollar teams and some of the richest people in the world that own some of these ball clubs, that are the majority owners of these ball clubs. You want to win a Super Bowl, and the Packers did that as well underneath Mark Murphy's tenure. You want to go to the playoffs. They did that 13 times, more than any other team over the last 17 years during Mark Murphy's tenure.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's taking this little light on the hill and making sure that that light doesn't stop shining. And Murphy definitely did that. So we got another couple months here to enjoy Mark before the transition to Ed Policy, who I think is going to do a fantastic job. But I tell people this all the time, and I wrote about it in Inbox again today. If I did anything here, if you did anything here, I just hope it's that we really told people who Mark was, who he is, and just the type of leader, CEO, president. It didn't matter if it was the Green Bay Packers or a local tire shop. I mean, the guy knows people, and he knows employees, and he knows how to lead, and he knows how to get people behind him. And I think the draft coming here is a good example of that as well.
Yeah, what Lambeau Field became in 2003 was very much a part of one of the biggest pieces of Bob Harlan's legacy, among several big pieces to his legacy during his tenure as president. What Lambeau Field and the entire Lambeau Field campus, if you will, looks like now is definitely part of Mark Murphy's legacy. The other thing I will say that I think will be very interesting to see, because the Packers are competing for championships. We know that they are close, and been to, with the current regime, Brian Gutekunst, Matt LaFleur. Been to a couple of NFC championship games, almost got there, didn't quite work out. But if this regime, as currently constructed, with Brian Gutekunst running the football operations and Matt LaFleur being the head coach, if they are able to win a Super Bowl, you can't forget that Mark Murphy hired both of those guys. So part of, I think there is potentially a big piece of his legacy that maybe hasn't been written yet. So I'll just throw that out there.
Excellent point, Mike. And the other thing I will mention, and I've said this numerous times, you know how this league works. You and I see it. There's franchises every 2 years. It seems like they're changing a GM, a head coach, people that are in a position of power. Mark Murphy, 17 plus years. He hired one general manager, one head coach, and the Packers drafted one quarterback in the first round. That's something special.
Yeah, for sure. With that, we will call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to continue following all of our coverage of the team on Packers.com. And we'll be back next week with a couple of more shows. And in the middle of next week, the schedule gets released.
Hey!
So on our second show next week, we'll be able to be talking about the 2025 schedule. So for Wes, I am Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.